Good morning, everybody. Um, Today we're going to do the January 14th lesson out of the IYM material, and I only chose it because I like it. We're not going to be able to do all the ones in January anyway, so I just arbitrarily picked this. Now, when we get back together in February, we will try to get back on the right weekend, which should be February the 11th, I believe. I would like to start today with a question, and if you did the last video that I recorded, you know that I will ask questions or I will say instructions, and then I will pause for probably about 15 seconds or maybe 20 seconds, depending on how it works out. Today, I want to talk to you about Mount Rushmore. First of all, I want you to think about for just a second who all is on Mount Rushmore. I'll pause here for a few seconds and you can pause the video if you like. Then I will start in again. I asked the question about who is on Mount Rushmore. The the idea here is I don't know how many of us have actually been to it or have seen it. I know it's a place I would like to go, and I know some of you probably have. But there are four presidents on Mount Rushmore, those being Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Teddy Roosevelt. I want you to create your own Mount Rushmores today, and if we were meeting together, I might do this a little differently. But what I'd like you to do is I'm going to give you some categories. These are not going to be presidents. They're going to be other types of categories that you can create your own Mount Rushmore with. I'm going to give you a list of 6 different categories, and then I want you to all talk about what 4 people would be on your Mount Rushmore of each category. Here are the 6 categories: male singers, female singers, scientists, astronauts, actors and actresses, and the Bible. So now I'm going to pause for about 15 seconds. You can stop and talk it over, and then I'll be back in just a little bit here. All right, I'm going to go through with you the names I would have put on my Mount Rushmores. Now I'm going to tell you that there is not necessarily a right or wrong answer, but I will tell you that when we get down to the Bible, there's a name that I hope we all picked, and it's not Jesus. Um, Now, not that I don't think Jesus should be on it. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But when it comes to male singers, here are the 4 that I used: Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra, Michael Jackson, and Prince. And if you want to argue with me about that, that's fine. When it comes to female singers, I struggled even more so in terms of who to pick there. I put Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, Aretha Franklin, and Dolly Parton. The ones that I tried to pick there, I tried to pick based on not only my personal preference, but the ones that I thought that had maybe the most impact and had some of the most success. So that's where that came from. Scientists, I picked Louis Pasteur, Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein, and Stephen Hawking. I will tell you that on the sciences, I had a hard time on the last one before I settled on Hawking. I thought about the Curies, and there were some others that came to my mind, but I settled on Hawking. The astronauts, Neil Armstrong, John Glenn, Yuri Gagarin, and Sally Ride. Uh, Gagarin being one of the early astronauts from Russia, and Sally Ride being I believe, the first woman um, in space. So that is where those came from. The actors and actresses, that I decided to pick two actors and two actresses. I had a very hard time with the actors. Um, I picked Tom Hanks and Marlon Brando, but I will tell you that I thought about Dustin Hoffman. I thought about Gene Hackman. I thought about John Wayne. I thought about Laurence Olivier. There were quite a few that came to my mind. Uh, Women the same way. I picked Meryl Streep and Betty Davis, but I could have easily picked Catherine Hepburn or Joan Crawford. There's a lot of actresses. Even Halle Berry, I thought about a little bit. So there's quite a few. When I went to the Bible, for me, Jesus, Moses, Paul, and David, and that's really where I'm headed with all this. I wanted you. I was hoping you all would pick Paul in your list of four. Today we're going to spend a whole lot of time talking about Paul as an individual. There's quite a bit with Paul. We know that Paul wrote at least 13 books in the New Testament and had a significant impact on how things went in the early church and so forth. But what I like you to do now is I'd like you to read Acts 9, 1 to 7. I'm going to pause here for a little bit, and you can pause it and then read the scripture, and then we'll start it again. All right. Now, the rest of what we're going to talk about is not only about Paul's conversion, but also about Paul himself. Um, and I'm going to try to draw a picture of his background and what kind of person he may have been. A lot of what I'm going to give you are lists that I need you to look at the list and then determine what the list has in common, how the list fits together. So here is a list of names I'm going to give you, and there's only 6, and then we'll pause for a second, and you could talk about what these might have in common. Seth Bullock, Bat Masterson, Joseph Meek, William Wheeler, Wyatt Earp, and Bill Hickok. So now I'll pause for a few seconds and you can talk about those 6 guys, and then I'll be back in a minute or 15 seconds. All right, let's talk about what these 6 have in common. These 6 gentlemen were U.S. Marshals, and they not only were U.S. Marshals, but they were in the time of the Old West. And the reason I'm bringing them up is the role of the U.S. Marshal at that time was somewhat like what the role of Saul was at this time. He had gone to the leaders at the synagogue in Jerusalem, and he wanted to go out and round up Christians, and he got papers that allowed him to do that. That's how the U.S. Marshals were used at that time back in the 1800s, is they would go out and they would hunt for outlaws and vigilante or fugitives and the like. And so that's why I brought that up. Is that what Paul is being given here is a kind of arrest warrant, way to go out and get Christians, and by whatever means he wants, and then he can bring them back to Jerusalem. I do not believe that there was intention for him to necessarily kill them, but to capture them and to bring them back. And this, then he's on the road to Damascus, and we know about his conversion experience with Jesus. But I want to talk to you a little bit about that. I'm going to give you another list, a list of things that have something in common. This is a list of about 10 things, and I'm going to read them to you, and you can talk about them, and then we'll get back together, and I'll tell you what it's all about. A plane taking off from 100 meters away, a fire alarm, fireworks, a food blender, heavy traffic, a lawnmower, a live music concert, a nightclub, a rocket launch, and a sperm whale. So stop for a minute and talk about what those all have in common. All right. What do these have in common? What they have in common is they are things that make loud noises. A sperm whale, for example, can make up can talk at a decibel of 230 decibels. A rocket launch is 180 decibels. A food blender is the quietest of the bunch at 85 decibels, and a plane taking off is 130 decibels. Now, if I were there, we would have probably tried to match these up, but I thought I would just give you a few examples. And you may be wondering, well, what's the loud noise all about? Well, you got to understand that for those that were with Paul, Paul heard and saw Jesus, but the ones with him did not. They heard a loud noise, and I'm guessing it was something like one of these 10 that I just mentioned to you, that they did not hear or see Jesus themselves, but they did hear a loud noise. Now, what I'd like to talk to you the rest, or not necessarily the rest of the time, but a lot of the time, is about Paul himself. There's not a whole lot known about Paul's background. We do know that Paul grew up apparently with fairly affluent parentage, because, pardon me, he was a Roman citizen, and for you to live in Rome, you had to, by birth, you had to be of a certain level, income level, to be a Roman citizen, and we know that. We also know that he has a sister, that he had a sister, but we do not know about his parent per se. And we know a little bit about his education, and I want to talk to you about. I want you to talk to you about that a little bit. But first of all, I'm going to give you another list, and I want you to talk about this list and what these locations have in common. I'm going to give you a list of 10. Then we'll pause, and you can talk about what they all have in common. Princeton, MIT, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, Pennsylvania, California Tech, Duke, Brown, and John Hopkins. So pause a minute, talk about that, and then I'll be back here in about 15 seconds. Okay. Well, you probably could tell that these are colleges. Um, Not only are they colleges, but they are listed as by U.S. News and World Report as the top 10 colleges academically in the United States. And you might say, well, why did I bring that up? Well, the reason I brought it up is when Paul was being raised, he didn't necessarily go to university, but he was given the finest education that was possible. And he actually not only was uh, taught by the priest and by those that were at the Sanhedrin, he was also sent to be taught by Gamaliel. And Gamaliel is later on talked about in the Bible, but he was thought of as one of the foremost scholars of his day. So being sent to be taught by Gamaliel would be like going to Harvard or going to MIT, and so that's why I brought that up. We Now I want to give you another list, and this list will be pretty evident to you, I think. But I'll read them to you, and then I'll talk to you about what they mean in terms of Paul, and because I want to talk about a little bit about where he was from and how he was why he was there. Uh, these are the cities I'm going to give you: New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Houston, Phoenix, Philadelphia, San Antonio, San Diego, Dallas, and San Jose. And I'll pause. We pause again, and I'll be back in about 15 seconds. Okay, you may have quickly figured out that these are the 10 largest cities in the United States. And I'll be honest with you, I actually looked up what the largest cities in the world were, and there was none from the United States that made the top 10. So I chose not to use them. Uh, but at the time that Paul was being raised, the two major cities in the world would have been Rome and Athens. But we know that Saul was raised in Tarsus, and we know that he was from the tribe of Benjamin, and that more than likely he was named after the king who was the first king, that is Saul, the first Israel king. The reason I bring up where he was raised is Tarsus was like a Rome or Athens wannabe. It was almost as big and almost as affluent, and it was known for the intellect that was there. So if you look at this, the United States has New York and Los Angeles as their two largest cities. Then you can think of maybe Tarsus would be the odd comparable maybe to Chicago or Houston. Uh, it was just like the next cut down from the top cities. So that gives maybe an understanding of what background he came from. He was a very well educated and uh, brought up Jew. He was trained in all the finest ways to be trained, and was all around the best minds and the best scholars. And I think there's some real significance uh, that goes with that, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. What I'd like to do now, I'd like you to pause it, and I want you to read Acts 9:17 to 22. Okay, um, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I want to talk about changes. I want you to talk. I want you to think about um, significant changes that have occurred in your life. And I'm going to pause right there for about another little bit, and you guys can talk about what have been some major changes in your life. Okay. Well, when we talk about major changes in life, uh, there's lots of things that we could list, lots of things we could talk about. I'm sure that all of you probably mentioned marriage, or most of you. Maybe the arrival of a new baby. Um, Parenting for most is a drastic change. Um, I don't know how many places you've lived in your life, but moving can be a major change.